Congratulations, as if you're watching this video then you've managed to survive the 3-week break between rounds 1 and 2 of the 2021 Formula 1 season. And after the phenomenal season opener we got in Bahrain, the expectation fell to Imola to keep us on the edge of our seats, as we discovered how many corners Mazepin would make it round this time. Hey there guys, and welcome to FP1, and welcome back to the Comedy Review, the series where I take you through the F1 weekend's action while doing the best not to cancel myself. This time we're here for the Formula 1 Gran Premio del Madre in Italia dell'Emilia Romagna Grand Prix 2021 at the Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari. Yes, that's the genuine name for this event. The Imola circuit had returned to the sport last year and provided a fairly good race. Well, unless you were from the Netherlands. And given how tight the field was in Bahrain, we were all expecting the same thing this time round. Before we do jump into the action, however, if you are enjoying the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. The YouTube algorithm is a pretty big simp for this sort of stuff right now, so any sort of interaction on the video would really help me out. And if you want to hear even more from me, you can drop me a follow over on Twitter or join the Discord community. All links for which you can find down in the description below. Anyway, let's hop into the comedy review. The race with a name no one mentions as it's way too f***ing long. So after 3 weeks away then, we were all ready to see the cars out on track once again under the scorching Italian sun. The F1 organisers on the other hand clearly had other ideas, as FOM got pranked by one of those YouTube tutorials telling you to delete System 32 on their live coverage. What this meant was that teams had no idea where the drivers were on track, and clearly Sergio Perez had the same issue, despite seeing Esteban Ocon's Alpine moments before he took the two of them out of the session early on. Both drivers may have got away without any penalties, however that didn't stop Perez's boss, Helmut Marko, ripping into his driver anyway. Then again, they were always praising Alex Albon, so maybe Red Bull are just big fans of reverse psychology at this point, who knows. The F1 cameras may have been off, however that didn't stop everyone's favourite dickhead, Nikita Mazepin, from putting it in the wall before the pit entry, bringing the session to an early close. At the end of practice 1 then, Bottas would narrowly edge out his teammate at the top, with the Red Bull of Verstappen third and Gasly continuing a strong pace from Bahrain in fourth. The Williams team also appeared to be quick, which is a sentence that no one's really said since the early part of the century. Nutella man Nicholas Latifi was 9th, with George Russell 11th, in what was a significant step up from round 1 in Bahrain. The question was though, could they keep this up? Well, Max Verstappen definitely couldn't, as early on in practice 2, his drive shaft decided to pick a fight with the exit curb of the final corner. Unsurprisingly, the curb won, sending Verstappen's car on a little road trip back to the garage. Now, it's fairly unusual for an FP1 video to go this long without mentioning the meme lords themselves, Ferrari. And this weekend would mark their first home race of the season. Charles Leclerc was such a fan of the circuit that he decided to have a closer inspection of the tyre barrier out of turn 18. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for once, however, as the Scarlet cars actually looked fairly quick and were up there with the top of the midfield. Bottas would lead FP2 with Hamilton even closer behind, while Gasly rounded up the top 3. Saturday then would get underway with the third and final free practice session. There was action from the start, as Nicholas Latifi decided to plunge his car into the corner named after one of the most successful Canadian F1 drivers of all time, as well as one of the most unsuccessful singers of all time. Yuki Tsunoda was also having issues, though rather than with the barriers, it was just with everybody else on the circuit. Red Bull and McLaren meanwhile would finally show their hand, Max Verstappen going quickest and being half a second quicker than Simp King Lando Norris. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas' Saturday would begin to fall apart, the Finn finishing 8th in final practice and reminding everyone that he was still shit. And so we finally get to qualifying then. Yuki Tsunoda had been complaining about the traffic all weekend by this point, but found out the best way to create a clear track is just to create a red flag instead. Sadly for Yuki, his AlphaTauri wouldn't survive this experience, placing him on the back row of the grid and allowing Mazepin to finish the session somewhere other than last. Speaking of our favourite mad lad Maz, the young Russian was continuing his quest to piss off every F1 driver known to man, overtaking Antonio Giovinazzi on his fast lap and ending the Italian's day a little bit early. Also out of Q1 were Kimi Raikkonen and Mick Schumacher, as the Williams held good on their early practice pace, both getting into the second part of qualifying. Q2 was fairly uneventful, with Alonso completing what he said was a great lap, only to be 15th and half a second behind Esteban Ocon. Sebastian Vettel was another big casualty of the session, being outqualified by Williams and putting his Aston Martin into only 13th spot. Then again, I'm starting to wonder if we should really be surprised by this by now. Ferrari were having a mixed session, as Charles Leclerc made it through, the second car of Carlos Sainz just missed out in 11th. Coming to the final part of qualifying then, and for the first time in about 5 years, we really had no idea who was going to make it onto pole for the second round of the season. Hamilton would be ahead in the first set of runs, with the Red Bull of Max Verstappen breathing down his neck. Any hope from a helping hand from Lewis's teammate would be short-lived, as Valtteri Bottas seemed to forget he was in one of the fastest cars in the field and was well off the pace around the track he took pole around in 2020. The second and final runs of the day was what everyone was focusing on, however, and rather than focusing on Mercedes or Red Bull cars, everyone was looking over at Lando Norris. The young Brit had been on fire over the weekend so far, and was looking set for a front row start, before everyone's favourite talking point of track limits took that lap away from him. Now, quite frankly, this was the right thing to do, as the FIA were actually abiding by the rulebook this time, and had laid this out at the start of the weekend. However, I'm going to stop talking now before I get hunted down and castrated by Lando Twitter sims. Aside from Norris, the other surprise of the day came from Red Bull, as Sergio Perez outqualified Max Verstappen to get his first front row start in Formula 1. This would also be the first time since Mexico 2018 that both Red Bulls started in the top 3, which I'm sure is a fact that won't show up on either Pierre Gasly or Alex Albon's CVs. Now, before we move on to race day, just a quick word from our sponsor. The Formula Merch Store sell a range of products from t-shirts to prints and phone cases all around Formula 1. At the moment, they've got collections for Ferrari, McLaren and Red Bull, which you can explore in detail over on their website. In addition, if you want to help support the channel, then you can place the code FP1 in at checkout to allow me to profit off some of the purchases. So if you want to find out more, go down to the description and click on the link below. So then, let's get on to the race. And blimey, well, it didn't disappoint, did it? The drama was ensuing before we even got to lights out, with God's Pierce slashing down ahead of the Grand Prix. This would prove too much for the Alpine of Fernando Alonso, whose car, despite being compared to a beluga whale in testing, swam about as well as a newborn baby after being yeeted into the swimming pool. The team would fix his car in time for lights out. However, the same could not be said for Sebastian Vettel, who would end up starting from the pit lane after complications with his Aston Martin. The race would finally get underway then, with Max Verstappen making a blinding start and getting his Red Bull into P1 by the apex of Tamburello. Light contact with #blessed led to the Briton losing part of his front wing end plate, and dropping behind his championship rival in the early stages of the race. In the meantime, more drama was happening at the back, as Nicholas Latifi had to take the risk of passing Nikita Mazepin, which went well. The other Haas of Mick Schumacher was also in trouble, as he decided to emulate Romain Grosjean and bin his Haas into the barrier onto the safety car. To rub salt in the wounds, the crash closed off the pit lane, so the German couldn't even pit for repairs. That said, a Haas front wing doesn't produce much downforce anyway. While Lewis was trying to close into the Red Bull at the front, his teammate Valtteri Bottas was driving like he was on the school run. The 2021 Mercedes was struggling to pass Lance Stroll, who was still driving the 2019 Mercedes, further driving home the fact that Bottas version 9.6 was still a heap load of shit. Sergio Perez was having a difficult time as well, slipping back at the start before picking up a 10-second penalty for overtaking into the safety car. Back at the front though, and Hamilton was taking advantage of traffic for Verstappen to finally close in on the Dutchman, until he came across George Russell. Lewis slid off the track and rather than reversing, thought he'd just try and add some extra downforce modifications to his Mercedes, by driving it further into the barrier. Now, usually with Mercedes, when it rains, it sadly pours, and this was exactly what happened half a lap later. George Russell was keen to be back in the Mercedes car after the Sakir Grand Prix last year. However, getting this close to Valtteri Bottas was probably not the best way of doing that. The resulting collision led to a red flag, and the chance for all the drivers to reset. By the time they got going again, the track had dried and everyone had switched on to the soft or medium tyres. Yuki Tsunoda had made good ground up to this point, having clawed his way up to 10th by this point in the race. However, a spin at the restart took him back to square one. Still, it could have been worse, as Sergio Perez tried his best Alex Albon impression at the first sector, summing up what was a pretty horrifying Sunday for the Mexican. Things were much more plain sailing for Max Verstappen, however, as the Dutchman pulled further and further out at the front, while Hamilton fought his Mercedes back into P2 by the flag. So, after all that, Verstappen came out on top ahead of Hamilton and the shock podium for Lando Norris in third. Now, if you listen closely, you can hear all the Twitter stands simultaneously climaxing after that sentence. And if you want my irrelevant opinions on this one, well, what a race. We had drama from start to finish, and the DRS tweaks from last year led to much more overtaking and some great moves at turn 1. And also, hats off to Nikita Mazepin, who despite all the odds actually managed to finish the race. My drive of the day for sure. Oh, I'm getting cancelled for that one. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please do drop a like and subscribe for even more content like this over the rest of the 2021 season. And let me know what you thought of the race down in the comments below. But anyway, that's all from me. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week, and I will see you all in the next one.